Yo, what's good with y'all? Welcome back to the channel. I hope y'all are having a wonderful and blessed day. Today we're gonna be watching Why Everyone Hates Goldberg. If you're like me, I'm in my 20s. I grew up in the ruthless aggression era, so by the time I got around to watching wrestling and understanding what it was, he was on his way out the door. Him and Brock just basically gave everybody the middle finger at WrestleMania 20. So I want to watch this video so it can give me some more to let me know some of the lore behind why everybody doesn't like this man. But leave a like before the video starts so it trends up in the algorithm. Let's get to Why Everybody Hates Goldberg.
When you think of Goldberg, you think of spears, of jackhammers, of that badass entrance with the pyro and the crowd going absolutely mental. But behind all the smoke and mirrors lies one of the most controversial figures in wrestling history. On one side, you have his bitter real-life feuds with legends like Bret Hart, Triple H, and Brock Lesnar, who've basically called him a walking safety hazard with zero wrestling ability.
Yeah, boo, damn Goldberg, that's right.
And on the other hand, you have a vast portion of the WWE universe that hates his guts for burying their favorite wrestlers and coasting on nostalgia for 20 plus years. Now, before we get into all the backstage politics and inflated records, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And by elephant, I mean the trail of broken bodies Goldberg has left in his wake. Because if there's one thing that unites wrestlers from WCW to WWE,
they hate him.
It's their collective fear of stepping into the ring with this human wrecking ball.
That's the ritual we
Yo, I ain't gonna lie. I'm getting ready to go to the ring and I see somebody hit one of those on the little camera or whatever. I'm out. I'm sorry. And if I'm scheduled in the next couple weeks to go one-on-one with him at a pay-per-view, whatever is going on, we need to rearrange our plot and our plans because we have completely lost it. This man headbutting lockers, he earning CTE on his own. No.
Let's start with the big one. Bret the Hitman Hart, December 1999, Starrcade, and what should have been a dream match turned into an absolute nightmare. Goldberg throws a kick that connects so hard with Bret's head that it literally ends one of the greatest careers in wrestling history. And here's the kicker. Bret has never forgiven him. The man has gone on record multiple times calling Goldberg one of the most unprofessional wrestlers there ever was.
You know, I got hurt by Goldberg. He never once called me after it happened, or I don't think he ever understood, or I don't know that he even does now or even cares that he cost me $16 million in like 2 seconds.
But wait, there's more. Fast forward to 2019, and we get the train wreck that was Goldberg versus The Undertaker at Super Showdown. Two legends, both over 50, trying to recapture magic and instead nearly killing each other on live television. Goldberg, true to form, bangs his head against something backstage and gives himself a concussion before the match even starts. Then he runs headfirst into the ring post like he's trying to break through a brick wall. Meanwhile, Taker botches a tombstone so badly it nearly snaps Goldberg's neck, and Goldberg returns the favor with a jackhammer that looked more like attempted murder than a wrestling move. And let's not forget about his incredible ability to injure himself. Remember when he was supposed to punch out a limo window in WCW? Dude nearly lost his arm because he didn't know how to safely break glass. Doctors literally thought they might have to amputate. The guy has turned self-harm into an art form. Whether it's the pre-match headbanging ritual, or just his general inability to execute basic moves safely. It's like watching someone play Russian roulette with their own body every time he steps through those ropes. But here's where it gets real.
Everything gets a lot worse the more you watch it. Like I said, I grew up in the era when he was on his way out. He made his way back after I kind of fell off of wrestling a little bit. I would check back in to see the pay-per-views. I was around for when he left, and I remember when he came back because it was a huge deal for people like me because when I started getting into wrestling, he just left. So I knew of the lore of Goldberg, but for him to come back, I was interested to see why all the older guys or all the old heads was raving about Goldberg. The character, the antics, all that is cool, but when you watch back the footage of how he injures people, whew.
Interesting. All these injuries and safety concerns start to make a lot more sense when you realize that behind all the intensity and monster push, Goldberg's actual wrestling ability was about as deep as a puddle. Here's the dirty little secret that WCW tried desperately to hide. Bill Goldberg couldn't actually wrestle. Like, at all. Well, the man had the wrestling IQ of a doorknob and the ring awareness of someone who'd never seen a wrestling match in their life. Look, I get it. The guy looks like he could bench press a small car, and his entrance still gives me goosebumps. But here's the thing. When you actually peel back the layers of this so-called legend, you'll find a guy who's managed to fool an entire industry into thinking he's something special when he can barely work a match longer than 4 minutes without seriously injuring someone or himself. The most telling example of this came in 1998 when William Regal was told by producers to have a competitive 6-minute match with Goldberg. What followed was pure wrestling cringe as Goldberg missed spots and botched cues, while Regal tried desperately to carry him through the longest 6 minutes of both their careers. You could literally see the frustration on Regal's face as he worked around a guy who had no idea what he was doing. It was like watching a master chef trying to make a gourmet meal with a toddler as his sous chef.
And if you don't know, William Regal, one of them ones. I ain't gonna keep pausing, but William Regal, you talk about a technician and a ring specialist. And like I said, I grew up when William Regal was like on the end of his career, but he one of them ones when it come to getting down and really, going at it in the ring.
Tried to have a match and Bill froze up. I can't. There's only so much I could do.
This is exactly why WCW kept his matches shorter than a TikTok video. The company knew they had lightning in a bottle with his look and intensity, but they also knew that the longer he stayed in that ring, the more obvious it became that the Emperor had no clothes, or in this case, no wrestling ability whatsoever. Every other top guy in the business, your Ric Flairs, your Bret Harts, your Shawn Michaels, they could go 60 minutes in the ring and tell a story. But Goldberg, the man needed a GPS just to find his way to the ring. But somehow, someway, WCW managed to convince the world that this limitation was actually a feature, not a bug. And that brings us to the most controversial aspect of Goldberg's legacy, his controversial undefeated streak. Because if you think his wrestling ability...
Let's just talk about the glaze that people put on that record, bro. That 173 record is one of the most glazed and over-push agendas that I've ever seen in wrestling history. Bro, the fact that, 173 wins, bro. And when you look back at how bad Goldberg actually is as a wrestler. Now, I ain't gonna lie. When I was younger, you could have fooled me with that and this, that, and the third. But it's just like now looking at it and seeing how nasty he is in the ring and how many people he hurt. The way they glazed that 173 is crazy to me, bruh. Some people glaze that almost as much as Undertaker WrestleMania streak, and I find that highly disrespectful.
Was questionable. Wait until you hear about the creative gymnastics that went into his streak. UCW claimed Goldberg had 173 wins and 0 losses. But ask any wrestler from that era, and they'll tell you that number was more inflated than a carnival balloon. The company was so desperate to create buzz around their golden boy that they started counting house show squashes, dark matches, and probably his morning workouts as official victories. Even Kevin Nash, the guy who eventually ended the streak, has admitted he has no clue what the real number was.
They won 173?
If you can find one piece of tape on any interview after the fact of beating Goldberg where I says that I ended his streak, which I never made mention to because it wasn't about that.
The whole thing was smoke and mirrors designed to make Goldberg look like an unstoppable force when in reality, he was just a guy who could spear people really, really hard. When the streak finally ended at Starrcade 1998, it wasn't just the end of Goldberg's momentum. It was the beginning of people asking serious questions about what they'd actually been watching all along. And nowhere would those questions be louder than when he eventually made his way to WWE, where the magic trick was about to fall completely apart. When WWE acquired WCW, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before Goldberg showed up. And when he finally did in 2003, WWE decided to throw him straight into the deep end against The Rock at Backlash. Now, The Rock could make a broomstick look like a good wrestler, so surely he could carry Goldberg to something decent, right? Wrong.
No.
What we got instead was 13
terrible.
minutes of pure awkwardness.
This is one of the worst matches I've ever watched in my life.
90-second squash matches was completely exposed when forced to work a real match. Things got even worse when he feuded with Triple H over the World Heavyweight Championship. The fans kept rejecting him week after week, and you could see Goldberg getting more and more frustrated with the negative reactions. But the absolute rock bottom came at WrestleMania 20 when he faced Brock Lesnar. By then, word had leaked that both guys were leaving WWE after the match, so the crowd spent the entire bout showering them with boos and chanting for Stone Cold Steve Austin instead. The match itself was a disaster.
Terrible.
Neither guy seemed to care. The crowd was hostile, and it perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with Goldberg's WWE run. He'd gone from being WCW's golden boy to WWE's biggest disappointment. After that embarrassment, most people figured Goldberg was done for good. His aura was shattered, his limitations were exposed, and he'd proven that he couldn't hang with the big boys when it actually mattered. But Vince apparently has a short memory, because over a decade later, WWE decided to give the bald fraud another shot. When Goldberg returned in 2016, WWE initially did something smart. They put him against Brock Lesnar in a quick, intense match that played to both guys' strengths.
Yep.
It was short, it was fun, and for a brief moment, it felt like the old magic was back.
I ain't gonna lie.
WWE had
That Survivor Series match, oddly enough, as much crap as we talk about Goldberg, that Survivor Series match, oddly enough, was actually good. It did exactly what it needed to do, in my opinion. Like, it was fast paced. It was like a boom, boom, we're done. And he looked strong in that match. I ain't gonna lie. And shout out to Brock Lesnar being the professional he is. But, hey, Goldberg looked like he was A1 that night.
How to use Goldberg properly, except they absolutely hadn't learned anything. Because here's where things get infuriating. At the time, Kevin Owens was having the run of his life as Universal Champion, putting on entertaining segments every week with Chris Jericho. These two were comedy gold, and everyone knew they should have main evented WrestleMania 33.
Yep.
But Goldberg, apparently writing his own contract, demanded one more title run for his ego. At Fastlane 2017, Goldberg beat Kevin Owens for the Universal Championship in literally seconds. Not minutes, seconds. Here was a guy who'd been working his ass off all year, carrying the company on his back, and he gets squashed by a part-timer who shows up twice a year. But wait, it gets worse. This decision bumped Jericho and Owens down to fighting for the US Championship at WrestleMania in the second match of the night. Chris Jericho was so disgusted with WWE's booking that he basically started planning his exit from the company right then and there. It was insulting to Chris, insulting to Kevin, insulting to the fans, and insulting to the entire concept of earning your spot. And just when you thought Goldberg couldn't possibly do more damage, Super Showdown happened. Bray Wyatt's unstoppable supernatural character, aka The Fiend, was the hottest thing in wrestling in 2020, and Goldberg buried it 6 feet under at Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia. Bray Wyatt was never the same after that pathetic loss. The worst part? When fans called him out for these selfish booking decisions, Goldberg refused to take zero accountability and said that he was just following orders. The same guy who complained about Kevin Nash and others going into business for themselves was now doing the exact same thing, except somehow making it even worse. By this point, it wasn't just about his wrestling ability anymore. It was about his complete disregard for anyone else's career. Triple H, during the first season of Tough Enough, absolutely eviscerated one of the rookies for saying Goldberg was their favorite wrestler.
If your biggest idol in this business is a guy that's been in the business for about a year, got everything handed to him, can't have a match longer than 4 minutes, has not wrestled probably for more than 3 months straight, and I wonder where does that mentally put that person?
Hunter didn't hold back, and years later on Talk is Jericho, Goldberg admitted there was real-life friction between the two. Then there's Bret Hart, who's never missed an opportunity to bury Goldberg in interviews.
When I hear about Bill Goldberg going to Saudi Arabia making $3 million for for a 10-minute match, and it bothers me a little bit to see all these guys go there and make enormous sums of money for a couple minutes work.
Even at his own Hall of Fame induction in 2018, Goldberg complained that wrestlers were leaving before his speech. But honestly, when you've spent decades injuring people, burying talent, and coasting on nostalgia, don't expect a standing ovation from your peers. The writing was on the wall. Goldberg had burned bridges with some of the most respected names in the business, and his reputation among his colleagues was in shambles. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth about Bill Goldberg's legacy. Here's a guy who stumbled into wrestling with zero training, got handed a monster push because he looked the part, and somehow managed to convince an entire industry that roids could replace talent. For nearly 3 decades, he's coasted.
You ain't have to cook him like that. Talk about roids could replace talent. Oh, you dirty, bro.
Mystique built around inflated numbers, 2-minute matches, and the collective amnesia of wrestling fans who refused to admit their childhood hero was a fraud. The hatred for Goldberg isn't just about his limited abilities or his injury-prone style. It's about what he represents. While guys like Eddie Guerrero, Seth Rollins, and CM Punk were grinding their way up from bingo halls and high school gyms, perfecting their craft for years before getting their shot, Goldberg walked in off the street and got handed everything on a silver platter. He's the ultimate participation trophy wrestler. A guy who succeeded not because he was good at wrestling, but because he looked like what casual fans thought a wrestler should look like. And the worst part? He's never shown any humility about it. Even now, he continues taking spots from younger, more talented wrestlers who've earned their opportunities. So yeah, Goldberg might be in the Hall of Fame, but his real legacy is being wrestling's most successful con man. And that's exactly why the wrestling world can't stand him.
Ooh, you ain't had to cook him like that at the end, but everything you said is true. Literally. I wasn't even alive for his WCW run, but when he came back and pushed that agenda, and at that time I wasn't even watching WWE as much as I'm watching now. I would catch the pay-per-views. I was not watching weekly shows that often. I would come around for WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, the Big Four, Survivor Series, and I would keep up through social media. So I had my ear to the streets, but I'm more locked in with it now than I used to be. And when I was a kid, I was a super fan, but nonetheless, just the way he pushed his agenda and the way he hurt people, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me why people don't really like him or respect him here in 2025. But like and subscribe if you're new, leave a comment too. I'm gonna see y'all in the next one. Dang, Goldberg.